I want you guys all to take a second and just imagine a space of unrestricted creative freedom where passionate and ambitious people can get together, gather, and create these immersive environments that can inspire other people. Take a second to imagine what's there, what it looks like, who is there with you. And in this space of unrestricted creative freedom, what do you think is possible? So, as ambiguous as that question sounds, I'm up here to convince you guys that those spaces are a lot more common and easier to find than you might think. Now, while you let that thought experiment marinate for a little bit, I'll tell you my story, and hopefully you'll begin to understand what led me to start asking these questions. So, when somebody asks me, Caden, where are you from? I have to decide between the short story and the long story. The short story being Davis, and the long story being that I grew up all over the place, moving place to place, country to country. It actually wasn't until I came here to Davis for 4 years that was the most I've ever lived in any one place. Because of my parents' work and their nomadic tendencies, I picked up the ability to adapt to change really quickly. I had to be able to make friends in a matter of a few days, and that ability is something that I hold within my character today. And so, as I grew up and I got older, I started to get a little more observant of the people that I would surround myself with, the friends that I made, and what character traits that my friends had. And I noticed that a lot of my friends were big dreamers. They were storytellers, and they have this trait that I like to call delusional ambition. And growing up, always shooting for the stars, has left me with this wondrous passion that I think that I embody today. And it was this mindset that introduced me to the event space in the first place. In high school, I went to an international school, and my graduating class, we had just over 20 of us. And because it was so small, we made efforts to socialize with the other local schools. And so there were these publicly organized parties that were on social media, and some of us would go to them. We'd check them out, see what they were like. And going into these places, these parties, I was really amazed by the organization, the music, how many people were there. And as a 15, 16-year-old going into these events, I was really taken back by the level of professionalism behind the planning of these shows. And it left me with a sense of authentic wonder and inspiration. And so after going to these for a few times, I became really curious as to who was hosting these. Was it a company? Was it the venue themselves? Was it some sort of bar? I wanted to figure out who was hosting these. And it turns out, after a year of going to these events, that the organizers were kids my age, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, that were putting this all together. And they were in charge of the planning, the organization, the operations of these shows. And I was wondering how they got the experience, the knowledge to put something like this together. And more importantly, I started asking myself who I needed to talk to execute something like that. And more strategically, what roadblocks were in place that prevented me from achieving something like that, from planning these type of events. And I think that it's this line of thought that fosters a really beautiful perspective on life and creativity in general. It was Steve Jobs that said, everything in life, if you look around, was made up by people that are no smarter than you. And once you begin to understand that, you understand that you can influence it. You can build your own things. And I think this understanding is the key to opening so many doors, to broadening your perspective, and allowing yourself to explore your interests with this sense of delusional ambition. And so I decided to pursue this interest of mine, and I started DJing. I started my own DJ company. I worked for a few years finding gigs here and there. I learned what a good show consisted of, what type of music would get the crowd going, how to create environments where everybody felt like they could relax and have a good time. Started meeting new people, asking a lot of questions, started working for a production company. And quickly I developed this deep passion for the industry. And in the midst of the pandemic that we were met with in 2020, I had all this experience and passion that was cultivated, but it was restricted. I was unable to continue hosting these events, continue my experience, continue learning, and I needed to find a way to feed that drive that I still had inside of me. And so I tried exploring different ways to stay afloat in this industry, and I quickly realized that a lot of other people were in the same boat as I was. A lot of other passionate creatives were struggling to find resources, platforms, and just the availability to perform, to share their art with others. And after COVID, something unique happened, and I noticed it here in Davis. A new scene started to emerge, this DIY scene. And this DIY concert organization scene was driven by those creatives, not other event organizers, not a company, but the creatives themselves who were putting these events on. And it was this birth of small creatives that inspired something really unique. And so, while these DIY shows were somewhat of a solution to the problems that were met with COVID, they still lacked they still weren't able to solve a lot of the other problems that were big picture, such as artists were still not being able to support themselves full-time on this. And another issue was venues in general. A lot of these DIY shows were held in backyards. And so, with these problems in mind, despite the challenges that we were all met with, I knew there was still hope for these creatives. Having worked with them for years and being really involved in this scene. And so one day, out of a culmination of passion, frustration, just desire to help, I figured I would just host my own shows. I'd host my own events and see how that went. I figured I had enough experience with my time DJing and working for the production company that I felt I was capable of doing something like that myself. And so I reached out to a few of the performers that I knew. The friends I had, brought them over to set up lighting and sound, booked security, we sold tickets, and I knew that through my experience that the event organizing process was multifaceted. And I'll break it down between two unique variables that I think are really important to keep in mind. The first being the artist experience, and the second being the attendee experience. Because what we were creating was unique and an emergence of something out of COVID, if we focused solely on the artist experience, the project that we were making, the system, would be unsustainable. And if we solely focused on the attendees' experience, we would be disregarding why we started doing what we were doing in the first place. And so we had to be very careful to balance these two approaches in hosting our events. And so we brought over craft vendors, music acts, we set them up with the right equipment that they needed, we made sure that we had all the permits necessary to host the events that we were doing. Like I said, we brought security on. Our approach was very holistic to these events. And soon, a system was built, and Davis Rave Co emerged. We created a template that existed between these large-scale concerts and the DIY scene. And somewhere in between, we broke from this path, and we found our niche. And in our time producing shows, we've grown a large team of ambitious, passionate, enthusiastic event producers. And after these 2 years of continuous shows, each better than the last, I sat down to write this talk. I reminded myself that neither failure nor success is permanent, and I was able to look back and identify 3 lessons, 3 takeaways from my time running this creative agency. The first being that there's a limit on what you can achieve alone. The second, that slow and steady will win the race. And 3, do everything from love, not for it. Unknowingly, I had embarked on this journey of entrepreneurship. We had identified a gap in the market, a problem that existed, and our project was a solution to that problem. And in running these shows, there was interest that developed from a lot of people, and everyone started to notice that we were doing something unique in this gap, the solution that we were filling. So we found these people, and it was my responsibility to take this spark of interest that people had and turn them into integral team members to go along with the Davis Rave Co project and to contribute with the mission that we were doing. So every day became an exercise of leadership and mentorship, working with a lot of people with different passions, with different interests. And I needed to involve everybody's ideas and contribute them towards this project that we had. It was no longer something that I created. It was something that was a culmination of dozens of people, and therefore it no longer was solely mine. And I think there's beauty in that. It became evident that it's everyone's unique talents and interests that are necessary in order to scale a brand, and that it takes momentum, passion, and innovative ideas from a diverse background of people to power an organization. So the second lesson, slow and steady, didn't become as apparent until a few months after hosting my first event. And we had thrown these shows, and in our eagerness to continue hosting more bigger events, we lacked the foresight looking back and improving on each event. And so we realized that that was something that we had to enforce and make sure that every event was better than the last. And we needed to identify key inefficiencies so that we not only maintained on our path of the mission what we were trying to accomplish, but that we were also improving and cultivating this group of passionate and ambitious event producers. And after operating for these years, we've built a loyal foundation of both attendees and team members. And this loyal foundation are the people that believe in the mission. They're the first people to buy tickets, they know the team by name, and they deeply believe in the mission and what we're doing. And it's equally as important to understand that the foundation that we have, everybody's alignment with our mission, needs to have their own perspective, their own unique attachment to that mission. And I think that's what makes it so special. And lastly, to do everything from love, not for it. In this industry, it's very easy to get caught up in the reverence and status of not only yourself, but everyone around you. It's important to understand that humility is a practice, a daily practice, and that nothing is permanent. And the realization that one day you could wake up and lose everything is a very grounding perspective. He who is wise can understand that he is not wise. The more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know. And I encourage you all to move with a purpose, to make every decision career-based, personal-based, relationship-based, out of a passion that you hold deep inside of yourself. It's my desire to introduce to the world the art and creativity that constantly surrounds us every day. That is what gets me up out of bed every morning. That is my drive. To know that somewhere there's someone that needs one word, one idea, one experience, one friend to uncover their own passion. And so I implore you all to do everything from love. I think there's a lot of parallels within the event production industry and the nuances of daily life that may not be as clear until you take the time to think about them. And at the end of the day, it's spaces of unrestricted creative freedom that will open the doors towards meaningful friendships, personal growth, finding purpose, appreciating art, and fostering love. So now my question to you all is, how can you curate these spaces, these environments, these experiences to inspire the people around you? What does this space look like where you can meet new people, accept them for who they are, learn to appreciate their character, grow with them, collaborate with them. And so in everything you do, be passionate, ambitious, and slightly delusional, and prepare to amaze yourself with the endless opportunities of creative freedom. Thank you.